on Twitter at Atlantic Council or at AC_Istanbul and at Turk Heritage. All of those handles we'll be using on Twitter, where we're also going to be live streaming on various accounts, including my own, Damon Wilson's, and the Atlantic Council account. We're on Zoom, as you know. We're also going to be on YouTube and LinkedIn on the Council's Facebook page as well. So that's just for the details. Our experience at the Atlantic Council during this period, we're in the 5th week of telework, is we don't use the word social distance around the Atlantic Council. It's physical distance. But we have found that through technology, we've actually brought our global Atlantic Council community closer together, that we're actually more galvanized and closer than we've ever been before. I couldn't be more honored to be hosting a virtual discussion with His Excellency Mevlut Çavuşoğlu, the Foreign Minister of Turkey. Mr. Minister, welcome to the Atlantic Council in a virtual sense. Our last public event with His Excellency was for a special town hall at NATO Engages to commemorate the 6th anniversary of NATO in April 2019, which we hosted together with the Munich Security Conference and the German Marshall Fund. We also hosted the minister at a roundtable in Washington, D.C. last October, the day after a historic White House visit by the Turkish president. So thank you, Mr. Minister, for agreeing to address our community today. I last saw the minister physically at a Turkish House in Davos. Just a wonderful innovation this year at the World Economic Forum. The Atlantic Council's experience in Turkey dates back over 10 years with a presence in Turkey. In the past 2 years, the Council has increased its engagement by launching the Atlantic Council Turkey program, which pursues an ambitious program, I would say even a deeper program than we had before, focused on U.S.-Turkey relations, regional security issues, economics, business, and migration. Under Atlantic Council and Turkey Director, Defne Arslan's remarkable leadership, and with her terrific team, Pinar and Grady, I know you're online as well. It's great to have you leading this charge with us. But under Defne, and thanks to the support and commitment of our partners in Turkey, our programming is continuously deepening and expanding. Over a month ago, I wrote in my CNBC column, Inflection Points, that coronavirus will change the world. We don't know exactly how yet, but it will have an impact on relationships, on the world order, on globalization, on our economies. And the Atlantic Council has tried to put itself at the forefront of the current impact of COVID-19, but also thinking about the post-COVID-19 world. The global system itself and globalization is under a unique challenge. Will countries around the world, acknowledging that we are all in this together, unify around this crisis and cooperate? Or will the crisis cause us to hunker down in our national positions? Dr. Henry Kissinger, our longest serving board member, said we have to take on the COVID crisis and build the future simultaneously, and that is certainly what we're trying to do at the Atlantic Council. The title of our event today, What Needs to Be Done Now to Define the Future, fits into this rubric. It clearly summarizes our predicament. The question on everyone's minds is, what does the future hold? What impact will this present situation have on that future? What sort of world will it be, and what can we do now to ensure a better, more secure, more collaborative, more cooperative future? We'll also take the opportunity to discuss important regional issues which Turkey is at the center of, including situations around Idlib, Libya, the Eastern Mediterranean, as well as always U.S.-Turkish relations. I'm greatly looking forward to hearing Minister Çavuşoğlu's thoughts and Turkey's perspective. The minister has been Turkey's Minister of Foreign Affairs for the past 6 years. We've had the honor of hosting him on several occasions, as I said before. Mr. Minister, I sincerely hope we're going to see each other physically in one geographic position very soon. As I remarked to a group of Turkish friends earlier this month, I hope to celebrate the end of COVID-19 by traveling to Istanbul and doing one of my favorite things on earth, which is taking a boat ride down the Bosphorus. Minister Çavuşoğlu, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, President Kemper, dear Fred, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning. It is a real pleasure to address you at this special event. And I would like to thank the Atlantic Council and the Turkish Heritage Organization for inviting me to speak at such a critical juncture. The coronavirus outbreak has been the ultimate stress test for the entire world. It has revealed our vulnerabilities. It has also shown our strengths, actually. We have seen that good governance and effective state capacity matter. Indeed, slow, piecemeal responses, confusing and populist public messaging, and unscientific approaches don't work. The damage to humans is enormous. I extend my sympathies for so many lives that have been lost. This is not the time of lament and do nothing. To the contrary, this is the time for reflection and leadership. What we do today will define tomorrow. There are two alternatives. We will either try to confine ourselves within our borders and negate what we have achieved in the last century, or we will prevail together with more cooperation and solidarity. Individual country responses are not and will not be enough. Even wealthy countries are buckling under the pressure. The virus attacks our very core as humanity and community of nations. But we cannot abandon the idea of progress. Like everyone else, Turkey is taking her own measures on health and economy. We started early and benefit from this. Our measures have been guided by a scientific council, and the steps we have been taken were decisive. President Erdogan also unveiled a relief package to support businesses and households. Turkey has also repatriated more than 25,000 Turkish nationals from over 70 countries. And here I would like to thank all those countries for their tremendous assistance. And at my ministry, we established a coordination and support center operating 24/7. And now we are prepared to repatriate another around 25,000 nationals from more than 50 different countries. I know that many countries are implementing similar measures. However, individual efforts will not be enough. Our global challenge requires a global response. And there are three short-term priorities: public health, economy, and regional conflicts. I will leave the public health and safety to the experts, but the refugees and vulnerable groups shouldn't be forgotten. As the country hosting the largest refugee population with more than 4 million people, we are doing our best to protect vulnerable groups from outbreak. Secondly, we must work together to protect national and global economy and trade. And the challenge concerns global governance. Here, logistics also is very important, that we have been working with many other countries to eliminate all the problems in front of logistics and trade. And the global multilateral system is in poor condition, and the need for reform is greater than ever, but I am not holding my breath. G20 is 80% of the global economy. It is more representative than other formats. In the 2008 economic crisis, the system worked because G20 worked. One can debate whether it is living up to its promise now. It should. We made our contributions by leading the way in forming a coordination mechanism with some members of the G20 initiated by Canada. We need to establish cooperation mechanisms among similar centers to assist each other and resolve common issues. Last Friday, the leaders of Turkic Council had an extraordinary summit in a video conference to discuss challenges related to coronavirus. As MIGDA foreign ministers, I mean Mexico, Indonesia, Republic of Korea, Turkey, and Australia, this is another group within the G20, we released a joint statement underlining the importance of robust international cooperation. We also called the Organization of Islamic Cooperation Executive Committee for an extraordinary video conference meeting at the level of foreign ministers. It might happen next week. COVID response was also the central theme of the NATO ministerial of 2 weeks ago. Ladies and gentlemen, last but not least, the coronavirus pandemic dramatically affects regions in conflict. It also poses a great threat to fragile states that will harm all of us. We estimate that there will be more states facing fragility and possibly even conflict and collapse. The pandemic disrupts humanitarian aid flow and diverts attention from the conflict prevention. But it must also disrupt proxy wars and geopolitical conflicts. It must end all policies that weaken nation states. We need a rules-based network of strong, resilient, and accountable nation states. No one will win, but everyone will lose if the current conflicts in the Middle East continue. Special attention to Africa is also essential. That is why in an article at Washington Times, I call on the international community to step down in all conflicts and cease hostilities. This wouldn't be possible in a piecemeal fashion. What we need is a grand bargain and decisive action. On our part, we will continue with our enterprising and humanitarian foreign policy. We will keep working for a political solution in Syria and supporting the call for a humanitarian truce in Libya. Turning inwards won't work. So far, we extended a helping hand to 34 countries, including some of our key allies like UK, Italy, and Spain, but also others. This is in spite of the fact that we are also in need of medical equipment. And we don't make the aid effort based on political considerations. That is why we also granted or offered exceptional export permits to the countries that we have strained relations. Ladies and gentlemen, a global effort is needed. And what we do today to make global governance work and multilateral cooperation work will define tomorrow. Thank you very much. And now I look forward having your questions, and I'll do my best to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. And I would like to welcome you again as Director of the Atlantic Council's Turkey program. It's an honor to have you here today. So without any delay, I'd like to continue with our questions and maybe go to more specific, especially on Turkey's coronavirus aid efforts. Mr. Minister, we would like to start with the latest developments on COVID-19. Could you please shortly summarize how Turkey approached and is approaching to the outbreak? Could you briefly outline what Turkey has done to combat the spread of the virus, and what role has Turkey played in receiving and offering assistance? Thank you, Mr. Minister.
Well, let me first share some figures. Already more than 400,000 tests, and we have around 61,000 cases, and the death is 1,000 296, and almost 4,000 recovered. And we took, as I said in my opening remarks, we took the pandemic serious from early on and adopted strict measures. And we follow the guidelines of the WHO. And all measures are updated based on the scientific data and the advice of the scientific board that I mentioned in my opening remarks again. And we are increasing testing capacity and more than 400,000, as I just mentioned, and we will reach 500,000 soon. And we introduced strict traveling restrictions, suspended all international flights, banned all travel to and from major cities. I mean, 31 major cities in Turkey, and closed land borders with some neighbors for human passage. However, goods are moving freely, facing sometimes some challenges there as well, but we are overcoming them. And those returning from abroad that I share the figures with you, abroad are put under compulsory quarantine for 14 days in special dormitories. You know, universities and dormitories are closed right now, and we take the advantage of that and putting those people in quarantine in those dormitories. And schools, universities, and places of large gatherings are closed. And we introduce a curfew for people under 20 and over 65. And we began imposing a general curfew on weekends first time, and it will continue, it seems, the upcoming weekend as well. And public employees are working in shifts, including at my ministry. And wearing a mask in markets and bazaars became mandatory. Actually, we have banned the sales of masks, not to monopolize the market, but we wanted to distribute them to everyone free of charge. And we will construct 2 new hospitals in Istanbul in maximum 45 days. And our fight against COVID-19 is praised overall by WHO and recently reiterated by Director General Dr. Tedros. We also took measures to mitigate the adverse social and economic effects of the pandemic. And our priority is preventing job losses and keeping production base intact, and tax reduction on various sectors, including tourism and aviation, credit and interest payments for businesses and SMEs postponed, financial assistance provided for exporters, more than $3 million of financial assistance to households. And we granted actually export license, as I said, to 34 countries for personal protective equipment. And we actually have received requests from 104 countries so far. Unfortunately, we cannot meet their demands, I mean, all of their demands, but now we are currently ranked 3rd globally among the countries that have provided the most aid right after China and the United States. And we redouble our efforts to increase production. Hopefully, we will be able to supply more to other countries as well. On the other hand, the struggle and even fight for medical equipment worldwide harms mutual trust among the countries. We regret to see that. And this is a global pandemic, and we need a global effort and solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Ali Bey?
Yes, Mr. Minister, on behalf of Turkish Heritage Organization, I also would like to say thank you for your time. Our question is, even in midst of worldwide effort to combat the spread of COVID-19, there is already a sense of blame invoked some nations for not doing more. How do you see different countries' responses, especially regarding international cooperation and from the angle of a post-COVID world? How will the world system be affected in regards to globalization or multilateralization versus deglobalization and unilateralization? Thank you.
Ali Bey, thank you very much for your question, and good to see you again, this time virtually. And I don't want to make comment about the measures that other countries take or their capacity, but it is clear that many countries at the beginning didn't take coronavirus into account seriously. We have to admit that we are certainly going through one of the turning points of history. Many things will be different in the post-COVID world. Different projections, predictions. People now talk about our world that is less open, less prosperous, and less free. An era of strong nation states, increased tensions between the United States and China, maybe even Russia, and increase in conflicts. Some also argue an end of the globalization. I don't believe so personally. Globalization is there, and the pandemic itself is proof of how we became interconnected and interdependent. The pandemic actually speeds up ongoing trends. End of a unipolar world, emergence of new power centers, the rise of Asia, rise in xenophobia, anti-immigrant discourses, Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, and etc., and rise of artificial intelligence and blockchain, weakening of European project, which we don't want actually. We are part of Europe, therefore we don't prefer that. And the pandemic is only reshaping the geopolitics of globalization. And it might be an Asia-centric globalization. And the pandemic can shock all of us and force us into more multilateralism. And the global economy will go into recession this year, this is for sure. And the downturn will be sudden and sharp. Unemployment will test all, including the wealthy nations. Again, what we need is more solidarity, more multilateralism, not isolation, populistic nationalist discourses. And we should ensure the flow of trade and increase swap agreements. Development banks and international funds should step in, and we should restore global growth and maintain market stability. And again, here G20 is key. Like in 2008 global financial crisis, it should step in. And G20 Leaders Summit on 26 March issued a strong declaration, and implementation is, of course, this declaration is important. So teleconferences with some G20 nations and with other initiatives, Canada and others, we have been actually, as Turkey, also spending a lot of efforts that that the solidarity and also global efforts should be more important, and it is actually, they are more important than ever at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Mr. Minister, international organizations have also been heavily criticized for their responses to COVID-19. NATO, however, has been quite active in offering and providing assistance to its member states. Can you briefly fill us in on NATO's role and coordination with its members and allied nations to combat the spread of the COVID-19? Thank you, Mr. Minister.
Lieutenant, thank you very much for your question. I forgot to say that it's such a pleasure to see you again.
Likewise.
And, you know, we can only eradicate this threat through collective effort. This is what I have been trying to emphasize several times since we started. NATO, as the most successful security alliance ever, should play a leading role. And this is what we have been discussing at many summits and ministerials, actually. NATO should adapt itself to the new realities. And this was the message we all expressed during the NATO foreign ministers that I mentioned again. And NATO's Euro-Atlantic Disaster Response Coordination Center has so far done a good job in coordinating and mobilizing the assistance among allies. And we are determined to do our utmost to help our allies and partners in these trying times. Donations to Italy, Spain, and UK, as I mentioned. and export permits to Hungary, Slovakia, Romania, Bulgaria, and donations to Balkan allies and partners like Albania, Montenegro, North Macedonia, Kosovo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as Serbia. And Turkey was the first to use the NATO's new response activity named as Rapid Air Mobility during its assistance to UK recently. And we believe NATO will continue to be one of the most effective platforms, and it will emerge even stronger after the pandemic is over. I can say that so far, NATO actually proved that it is a strong alliance.
Thank you, Mr. Minister.
Mr. Minister, another question is about Syria. How was the continued increased conflict in Idlib, the flow of refugees from Syria, impacted Turkey at this time during the pandemic? What will Turkey's role be moving forward in this conflict?
Thank you very much. Ali Bey, we have been repeatedly saying that we are hosting 3.6 million Syrians in Turkey. Actually, we are responsible altogether for 9 million Syrians in Turkey and the Syrians in Syria, IDPs or local people. And humanitarian situation in and around Idlib and in many parts of Syria actually not very good. And in Idlib, it was already grim before the pandemic. And regimes indiscriminate attacks displaced millions, and mostly women and children, vulnerable people. And the pandemic worsened, of course, the situation, and they now have to survive in overcrowded camps or bombed buildings where social distancing or physical distancing, as I said, like medical, and isolation, are hard to practice in Idlib region. Some of the IDPs, thanks to ceasefire, went back to their homes, but not so many because the fear is still there. And the regime, at the other hand, destroyed vital infrastructure like medical facilities in Syria. Under these circumstances, tackling the pandemic is very difficult, frankly speaking. And Turkey is the main source and artery for the cross-border humanitarian assistance. We have been working with UN agencies and also humanitarian organizations. And the COVID-19 makes these relief efforts even more difficult. And we are concerned that this might trigger another wave of refugees to Turkey. Due to the international community's failure, unfortunately, around 1.5 million Syrians are at our doorstep at this moment. And we cannot handle, obviously, a new wave from Idlib or elsewhere. It's not only about the capacity or the burden, but this will bring additional health risk as well. And international community must act before it is too late for Syria and Idlib. And Idlib desperately needs more foreign assistance and a solid international response plan, which we don't have right now. And this ceasefire of March 5th in Idlib holds, despite occasional violations. It is crucial to maintain it as it will facilitate efforts to fight a positive COVID-19 outbreak. We need actually concrete and timely and unconditional support from our allies. First and foremost, the United States. So far, we have received strong support from United States in words, but we need to see this in practice as well. And the only viable way out to this conflict is a political process in the line with the UN Security Council Resolution 2254. And we should go back to Geneva for the continuation of the actual Constitutional Committee meetings. Unfortunately, after the second meeting, that committee couldn't gather until today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Actually, we want to go a bit deeper on the issues that you just touched, and thank you for flagging them. Maybe, do you expect any change in the UN structure or UN Security Council structure following this pandemic, sir? You know, just could you elaborate on that a bit? Thank you.
I think everybody agrees that UN Security Council has been late to respond to COVID-19. They met to discuss the pandemic almost 4 months after the outbreak. This is unbelievable, outrageous. In fact, the Security Council has failed to address the other international conflicts properly, as in the case of Syria. You know, Syria is only one of them. Look at Libya, Yemen, and the others. And its structure needs to be adapted to the global challenges as well. Turkey is a strong advocate of the Security Council reform. And as President Erdogan repeatedly underlined, the world is bigger than 5. And obviously, we have to also admit that UN Security Council is not inclusive, neither inclusive nor representative. That said, we welcome, of course, the efforts of the Secretary General, and these steps were taken in the right directions, like the Global Humanitarian Response Plan, the Response and Recovery Fund for the least developed and low middle income countries, and the call for a global ceasefire. And so far, UN General Assembly adopted 2 resolutions, and Turkey, by the way, co-sponsored both of them, and they were also in the right direction. And still, you know, despite all this criticism to United Nations or other international and regional organizations, the UN's efforts are vital for so many vulnerable groups and conflict regions. I just mentioned some of them. And we don't have a better tool at the hand at this moment, and we should do our best to support it. But at the same time, we should actually intensify our efforts to reform this umbrella organization and its institutions, particularly the UN Security Council, as you mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Minister, another question is, you recently published an article in an international newspaper criticizing the EU's inaction on Idlib, reminding that the Turkish-Syrian border is also the southeast boundaries of European Union and NATO. Can you inform us where we are with the EU and Turkey relations?
Well, Ali Bey, it's a long story. You know, it has been how many years? More than 60 years that we officially applied for a membership. During the last leadership, I mean previous leadership, and the European Parliament, unfortunately, not because what happened in Turkey, also because of the trends and developments within the European Union and its institutions, our dialogue was not satisfactory with the European Union. But after the change in the leadership of the European Union, high-level contacts have increased since last year. And President Erdogan visited Brussels on March 9th. And we had frank discussions, actually, on March 18 agreement and overall Turkish-EU relations. And President Michel was in Turkey 2 times, and Turkish and EU leaders decided to begin an exercise on converging our differences. We still have differences. And I and High Representative Borrell are jointly leading the work to this on these issues, and we are in constant contact with the leadership right now, as well as Borrell and the new enlargement commissioner, and our trade minister has been in contact with her counterparts, I mean Commissioner for trade. I hope this pandemic will encourage more strategic thinking on the side of the European Union. And as Turkey, we always say, we need Europe, European Union, and European Union needs Turkey. Unfortunately, it is increasingly becoming, this organization, EU, becoming hostage to xenophobia, racism, Islamophobia, and anti-Semitism. And body organizations like European Parliament have been very much polarized. Instead of the core values, ideologies have been actually dominating this organization. And with regards to our cooperation in Syria and the refugees in Turkey, we have reached an understanding in 2016. As Turkey, we have honored our obligation until today. But unfortunately, for many reasons, European Union couldn't do that. Now we are working how to revitalize this, but our relations with the European Union is not limited with the refugee or our cooperation on migration or refugees. We have cooperation in many other areas. Forget about the enlargement and negotiations, but also visa liberalization and modernization of the custom unions agreement and counterterrorism and so on and so on. Therefore, at this critical moment, I think we should be more visionary to first create a more positive atmosphere in our relations, and then to continue our cooperation in a result-oriented manner, and it should be a genuine cooperation. Did I answer your question fully, Ali Bey? It was a long question.
No, it was great. Thank you for the response, Minister.
Mr. Minister, if I can jump in quick, we have so many questions to ask. And I'd like to jump on again back to S4, actually to Idlib and S-400 issue. Turkey's purchase of S-400s created a lot of debate in the United States, including in Congress, and the issue seems to be the main point of discord and obstacle in bilateral relationship. I want to link this issue to the situation in Idlib as well. For a while now, Turkey has been asking for support from the United States and NATO against attacks in the area. Recently, U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Kay Bailey Hutchison, said that the United States is ready to assist Turkey in Idlib. If Ankara rejects the S-400 missile system, how do you comment on the U.S. approach and the fact that the situation in Idlib is linked to the S-400 missile system? On the other hand, recently President Erdogan had also said that it would be the system can be turned on in April. Will it become an operational soon, or is there a calendar still under debate? I appreciate your answers. Thank you, Mr. Minister.
Well, thank you for your question. First of all, it is not appropriate to put preconditions when an ally is in need, an urgent need, like happened in Idlib. And all the allies, and mainly United States, recognized and appreciated what Turkey did to stop the bloodshed. But Turkey needed the support of NATO, as well as the member states, allies support. And we need advanced missiles and air defense systems to protect our people. And this is also a long story. And the ballistic threat that Turkey faces is real, because even the regime has the missiles in Syria. And it is this fact is accepted by everyone, including the United States and NATO. And Turkey's decision to purchase the S-400 system is a result of U.S. reluctance to meet our urgent needs for many years, for 10 years or. And this is also acknowledged by President Trump. Our previous attempts to purchase Patriot system were inconclusive. And the Congress, unfortunately, yes, I can understand their frustration. and the reaction, but the Congress played a negative role in that respect. And we are ready to purchase Patriots if we have a good offer. And our stance on the resolution of S-400 issue has not changed. We offer the US to establish a technical working group with NATO's inclusion, and NATO can lead this technical working group actually. And this offer is still on the table. So Turkey will never put the integrity of the NATO defense system at risk. This also includes the F-35 program, of which Turkey is a founding partner, and we have already spent $1.35 billion for F-35 program. At the end, what I am trying to say that we had to buy S-400's air defense system just because we couldn't purchase those kind of system from our allies for last 10 years. And in the future, we need more air defense system. And if our allies can provide, it doesn't have to be only Patriot from United States, it can be also actually SAMP-T of Eurosam. This is a joint venture of France and Italy, or any similar system from other allies. And we prefer to purchase from our allies. If not, I have to seek alternatives. So this is my answer to your question. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Minister, follow up to Defne Hanım's question. Turkey-Russia relations. So Turkey and Russia have important relations. They are very close in many areas such as energy and trade, but they have also tense relationship regarding the situation in Syria. So many experts believe the current ceasefire difficult to sustain. And experts and politicians in the United States are presenting Turkey in such a way that the country has a choice to make between Russia and United States. So how do you comment on this? Do you believe there is a choice to make?
Well, first, Ali Bey, no countries in our region has to make a choice between this country and that country. And we should all balance our relations with everybody. Russia, we have to admit this, is our neighbor and a very important actor in our region. So it is natural to cooperate with Moscow, although it is not always easy, as you also mentioned. Our bilateral relations are multidimensional. Our energy, trade, and tourism cooperation are mutually beneficial. And we also try to have constructive relations on regional issues, especially on Syria and Libya. Our cooperation can be instrumental in conflict resolution. And that's why Astana process has been effective. And that's why actually we were able to announced a ceasefire together with Russia in Istanbul. Clearly, we don't agree on everything with Russia, and we do not shy away from expressing our disagreements, like Ukraine, Crimea, Georgia, Syria, and sometimes even in Libya. And we work with Russia where and when it is possible, but when necessary, we stand firm. That's why from time to time, there could be some tensions. On the other hand, Turkey is a NATO member, and the United States is our most important ally. Our cooperation with the US on various issues and at different geographies are vital, including Afghanistan. Let me be clear, Ali Bey, Turkey's broader strategic direction has not altered. A change of axis does not make sense to us because we are in this region at the center of the axis. And Turkey's long-standing Euro-Atlantic orientation and its relationship with Russia are not mutually exclusive. To be more precise again, we don't see ourselves as having to make a choice between the US and Russia. By the way, yes, we have been cooperating with Russia in Syria and Libya, but we have never been on the same side with Russia. But some of the allies are shoulder by shoulder with Russia. I mean, in Libya, they are not on the ground fighting shoulder by shoulder, but like France, both of them are supporting Haftar, and they are at the same side. Neither in Libya nor in Syria, Turkey and Russia have been at the same side. We have been at different sides, but we took the advantage of being at different sides actually to bring at least, not peace, but at least to maintain ceasefire and to calm the situation in both countries. Thank you.
Mr. Minister, since you have flagged Libya, on one of your press briefings, again, you have said that Libyan military commander Khalifa Haftar is seeking a military solution to the lingering conflict in the country. Is there any progress in this conflict, especially after the Berlin summit? Are you optimistic or pessimistic regarding resolution of this conflict, Mr. Minister?
Well, the Berlin conference, Leftanum, was an important step to stabilize the situation in Libya. However, Haftar intensified his military campaign after the conference, and his forces are targeting mostly civilians and civilian infrastructure. Are we surprised? No, we were expecting that. Why? Because in Moscow, Haftar refrained to sign the peace agreement or ceasefire agreement, actually. But the legitimate government and its leader, Sarai, signed the document in Moscow. And in Berlin, nobody was able to convince Haftar to express his support to the joint communique of Berlin conference. Nobody was able to convince him even to bring to the chancellery of Germany. And he stayed at his hotel. And even the latest call for a humanitarian pause to cope with the pandemic didn't stop Haftar. So they continue to shelling of Tripoli, targeting civilians, block the oil flow, and drop revenues for medical and personal protection equipment, cut essential water and power supplies in Tripoli. So there can be no military solution. Haftar has to understand that, or somebody has to convince Haftar that in Libya, there will be no military solution. Only the solution is the political one. And it must be Libyan-led and Libyan-owned. This is the principle that we support. And international community should actually put pressure on Haftar, as I said, and its supporter, his supporter. Like UAE, Egypt, and Russia has, this company over there, and France, I have to add, from Europe, and the Haftar at the end has to hold the military campaign, lift the oil blockage, and agree on an official, and this time a binding ceasefire agreement, and that is only the way also to implement the Berlin conference conclusions. So Turkey's involvement in the conflict balanced the power on the ground. It is thanks to Turkey's involvement that Berlin process is still alive. And as Turkey, we will continue to support UN-backed legitimate government of Libya. Again, only the solution is the political one. But the reason that Haftar is not agreeing the political solution, or Haftar is not for political solution, is that Haftar doesn't want to share the power in Libya, and he wants to get all the power through military campaigns. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Minister, another hot topic is energy in the region. So Turkey has sent 2 drilling ships to explore for gas in waters of island of Cyprus. So what needs to be done to have a solution in the Eastern Mediterranean? Is Turkey willing to reach a compromise with Greece?
Well, Ali Bey, why we came to this point, that point? How? And, we have been asking European Union, UN, even Greece, that Greek Cypriots shouldn't have conducted actually any kind of activities, drilling or exploitation activities at the Eastern Mediterranean before they reach an agreement on equitable revenue sharing. But unfortunately, it didn't happen. So there are two aspects of these issues. Delimitation of maritime boundaries, first, and secondly, legitimate and equal rights of the Turkish Cypriots on the natural resources of the island. And we keep suggesting a new dialogue on the Eastern Mediterranean at the highest level with Greece. President Erdogan himself actually proposed Prime Minister Mitsotakis in London on the occasion of NATO leaders meeting. But Greece prefers to lobby against Turkey's legitimate rights in the region instead of answering our calls for sincere dialogue. For regional stability, the main focus should be bringing two sides together on the island for equitable revenue sharing. And the proposal of Turkish Cypriot authorities represents the only reasonable and realistic base for a solution. Turkish Cypriots proposed to establish a commission for equitable revenue sharing, which is fair enough, because the Greek Cypriots don't want to sign any kind of agreement with Turkish Cypriots. It means for Greek Cypriots the recognition of the Turkish Cypriot state, or Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, I mean. And we expect international community to encourage Greek Cypriots to talk to Turkish Cypriots. And Greek Cypriots shouldn't act as the sole owner of the island. And this is the reason of the tension at this moment at the Eastern Mediterranean. And EU measures, actually, they have taken some measures against us and do not contribute, those measures do not contribute to the solution, only encourage Greek Cypriots to move further away from this solution. And hydrocarbon activities will continue. Now we have the third drilling ship, Kanuni, and we may send it, if it is needed, to the region, And we are open at the end, Ali Bey, for dialogue with all countries. We have been repeatedly underlining this. All countries for the maritime boundaries delimitation, of course, except Greek Cypriots, because we don't recognize them. Thank you.
Mr. Minister, we discussed a lot of issues, and time is not enough, and also a lot of conflicts in the region as well. Do you expect the coronavirus outbreak to affect the efforts for a peaceful resolution of the conflict, sir?
Well, I tried to explain this in my opening remarks, and the pandemics will, of course, affect, conflict regions even more. It can also limit the international interest in solving conflicts, because the priorities now are totally different than the priorities 3-4 months ago. And at times like this, each country tends to focus on its own domestic situation. I can understand that. However, we should maintain the momentum to resolve conflicts peacefully. This coronavirus will be over today or tomorrow. But if we cannot resolve these conflicts, the impacts of these conflicts might be tremendous globally. And conflict resolution and mediation is indeed one of the major pillars of our enterprising and humanitarian policy. And we launched the Mediation for Peace initiative together with Finland at the UN a decade ago. Now the group of Friends of Mediation has around, I think, 60 members. And we also co-chair the groups of Friends of Mediation at the OSCE and at the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. And we organize annual mediation conference in the autumn. I hope we will be able to actually convene that conference this autumn as well. and the mediation for peace certificate program for young diplomats. If we cannot organize this program, I mean physically, maybe we can have an open program that young diplomats from all over the world can reach. Meanwhile, we will of course continue educating the mediators, not only mediators of the Islamic countries, but also the other mediators of other countries. And the program has been very attractive. We should continue that. And we will continue to use all these platforms and mechanisms to raise awareness and capacity for peaceful resolution of all the conflicts, not only the conflicts in our region, but the conflicts beyond as well, beyond our region as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Minister, before we close up, it's the last question. Does the pandemic affect diplomacy in your opinion, especially interaction on digital platforms?
Well, no doubt that Ali Bey, outbreak affects diplomacy as well. It limits traditional face-to-face interaction. Many summits, meetings, and events are cancelled or postponed to another time. Several important meetings have just
to thank you for taking the time to join us for this timely conversation. We believe that it was a very productive conversation and our audience also enjoyed. As a Turkish Heritage Organization, we continue to foster the relationship between two NATO allies, and we are stronger with allies, of course. And also I'd like to thank you, the Atlantic Council, for their continued partnership and alliance with our organization. We deeply value the work of Atlantic Council and Atlantic Council of Turkey and look forward to our continuing partnership. Our joint panel is live streamed, but also will be available on the websites and the YouTube channels of both Atlantic Council and THO. And would like to thank you again, and Defne will be making the closing remark.
Thank you, Ali Bey. You know, just as you said, it is wonderful to be cooperating with you. Thank you to you and your team, Turkish Heritage Organization. Mr. Minister, it was an honor to host you today, and thank you for enlightening us and answering all our questions, you know, patiently. And we do hope to, you know, host you at some other occasion, hopefully soon and live. Instead of virtual, and hopefully the COVID-19 will be over soon for all the globe. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks to Atlantic Council and also Turkish Heritage Organization.
Thank you. Thank you for joining.
Enjoyed.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank the audience for joining as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.